I'm very excited to bring up on stage someone who's been a CMO for a very long time, or in charge of a large marketing organization for a very long time, both currently at Visa and formerly at Pepsi, Antonio Lucio. And I have to say, it was really an honor to have him come here. When I met him for the first time, he had this sort of energy and enthusiasm, particularly about the space that we all live in, that I think you'll find is infectious. So please join me in welcoming Antonio to the CM Summit. As I noted, actually, in my when I wrote up, I did a little research on you.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I Googled you. And the first thing that came up was this headline from the San Francisco Chronicle saying, "Google hater, Antonio Lucio." So that was interestingly recursive. What's that all about?
Well, it came out of the Caltech conference, and I was explaining the very challenging environment that marketers like myself have to deal with today, particularly marketers that live in San Francisco, where you are surrounded by every single technological idea as it pertains to media that there is. And I was describing the way that a typical day for my marketing team goes. And I started saying that, you know, the door knocks and here comes Google. And Google comes in with all its staff and all its numbers and data, its leadership position in the search engine, and wants to take all the money from you. And after that, here comes Facebook. And Facebook has its 600 million plus, God knows how many more. Talking about social, the fact that search will no longer be a Google option, but rather a social option, so that we should do and give their money to them. And after that, Twitter, and after that, Singa, because engagement in play is significantly higher than the level of engagements that we've been measuring everywhere else, and on and on and on and on. Because that is reality. That's what we live today, particularly in a big brand like us that has to deal with not only the opportunities in the digital world, but importantly, the opportunities in the traditional world, because when you're a global player, TV continues to work in many of the emerging markets, and in fact, the inflation that we're expecting for media for next year are double digit in some of those markets. So that was the context of what I said, and someone decided to call me a Google hater, and that's what it was.
But you didn't actually say you hated Google. Just to clear up the record. I want to make sure Neil Mohan over there is breaking out in
I cannot
sweat.
say that I hate Google, because actually one of the fundamental changes that we've had to undertake at Visa, which actually shook our agency environment a bit, was the fact that we figured out that in order to capture the potential of Google and Facebook and Twitter, that we needed to have them part of the co-development process, both at the creative and at the product side of the equation, so that we could deliver truly compelling propositions. So when you guys see our London 2012 platform, that platform would have been developed not only by our advertising and media agencies, but by Google people and Facebook people and Twitter people. So that's the world that we're living, and we're cooperating in a very, very interesting sort of way. So I cannot hate them. I compete with them, and I do business with them, because that's how we do business in the Bay Area.
You compete with them, and so so unpack that a little bit more.
They will. Google just launched an open wallet with NFC, or near field communications connectivity, and they want to have a piece of the payment network within the new digital and non-digital environment. As part of that platform, which is an open wallet, they will require payment options. Right now they have one, which is MasterCard, but their platform is open, so we will need to be part of that as well. So in a way we'll be cooperating and competing at the same time, which is the rules of engagement of this new world.
I, as a publisher who works with Google, understand. So I wasn't planning on going all the way here, but you brought it up, so I'm going to ask. Visa is an interesting, and one of the reasons I was really interested in having you here is not only, obviously, is Visa a brand driven, by marketing, because you are not, in and of yourself, Visa is a brand that is of and in service to a network of banks that then execute under your umbrella. You're an umbrella brand of sorts, sort of have an Intel-like, profile. But also, your brand and what it represents, payment systems, is in the center of an extraordinary storm in terms of disruption. That, as you point out, Google is getting into the payment business. Facebook is getting into the payment business. And these are the two first companies that came to you and say, hey, market with us, give us a big share of your budget, marketing budget, and oh, by the way, I'm going to disrupt your whole business while we're doing this. That must make for some interesting sales meetings.
It is just the rules of engagement of the new world, John, and I found it, as you mentioned, I've been doing this business for a very, very long time. I've been doing global marketing for a long time. I've traveled the world. I've seen trends. I've seen continents and economies up and go. The moment that we're living through technology is probably the most transformational moment that I've ever lived. I mean, everything that we do, the way that we consume the information, the way that we engage with our friends, with brands, with institutions, the way that we play, and now even the way that we shop has been forever transformed. That's changing dramatically the rules of engagements from a marketing standpoint, and we can talk about that in a minute, but it also changing the rules of engagements in terms of partnerships. When you have a world, and one of our agency people came up with the term convergence, come from commerce. You have real world, digital world, mobile technology, social input required, because in essence, the act or the action of transaction has been transformed into a social value-added experience. That means that when you follow the path of the consumer, in order to make a transaction, you're going to have input from social, you're going to have input from search, you're going to have technology required to engage at the moment in which you're in the store, or when you're in your mobile phone, or when you're in your iPad, for example. Because all those energies are converging, there is a new need for a different partnership model. So that's why you see Google partnership with payment companies like ourselves. That's why you see payment companies like ourselves coming on with solution. At the end of the day, all this is going to benefit the consumer. All this is going to make the holistic social value-added experience a truly gratifying in value for consumers, and I think it's going to create all sorts of value across the multiple dimensions of the chain. So we actually welcome very much the fact that companies like Google, companies like Apple, companies like Amazon are entering into the space.
What do you believe, either now or perhaps it's aspirational, the Visa brand means to consumers in the context of payment being fulfilled by Apple or by eBay or by Google?
Well, but our positioning has been, and if we do our things right, will continue to be the universal currency of life. We've always been able to.
So a small brand proposition.
It's small brand. You have to have it, otherwise you don't have a brand that stays for a long time. That means fulfilling the needs of payment anywhere, that you are at the moment that you want and the way that you want it. That today has been traditionally through cards. As we move into the future, it will be through many other options, some of them that we're seeing today, some of them that have not even been imagined, and we are committed through our investment in technology and partnership to be at the forefront of that particular change. But John, what I was telling you is that has changed the dynamic of the product development side of the equation through partnership, but it has also, the new world has dramatically changed the marketing model. And all the description of what I gave at the beginning can be, as the theme of your meeting showcase, can be rather daunting for marketers and also for consumers. So this finding signals, this becoming a lighthouse to help navigate the storm of the consumer and the storm of the corporation in which you're working is perhaps the single biggest, most important role that the marketing organization has to play. And at no time in my history has it become more important or more challenging. We've had to adopt models to actually help us navigate through the decision-making process. So we brought in the consumer decision journey from McKinsey that help illustrate that the path to transaction is multivariable, and it's social, and it's and it's conversational, and help through that exercise come up with a strategy for engagement even before we do creative development. So in a way, our media partners are upfront and center in the creative process, followed by the creative to actually deliver the holistic conversation. The second point that we've had to change is that the way that consumers, all of us, are engaging in social media, it's creating expectations in the consumers, and we know that from data as to how we need to engage outside of social media. So from a development standpoint, in addition to having the media first or audience first approach, once we've developed that path to transaction, we're encouraging our agencies to follow three principles. Sharing is the new giving, and this is from our agency partner OMD. Again, we're stealing all this concept and bringing it into a unique model. Sharing is the new giving, participation is the new form of engagement, and recommendations are the new form of advertising. So all the platforms that we're developing in the US, but now more globally, have to follow those three parameters. And then finally, ensuring that after the audience first approach has been done and those principles have been followed in terms of content creation, when we are working on the media plan, your world has become an integral part of it. So now it's not only bought, owned, earned, but it's also shared. And it has to be structured in the media plan upfront to ensure that those things happen. Because the way that the consumers are engaging, a blog from you is as relevant as a conversation among friends, or perhaps more depending on the consumer that you're talking about. So we've had to fundamentally change the model, our go-to-market as a marketing organization model, and that has resulted in several conclusions. Number one, that we needed to increase significantly our budget in the digital space. So we went from 12 to 36 in a 2-year period. Again, parts of our—
12% of your spend to 36%.
To 36.
You tripled your spend on a percentage basis.
In 2 years. And again, when you're a small brand and you say you're all digital, you know, kudos to you. When you're a big brand and you have to make these choices, and by the way, you have some matrix. Some of them do not speak to each other because the way that you measure Facebook is different than Google, et cetera, et cetera. This requires the development of the approach that I described in order to sell it first and foremost internally to the organization and then to translate that into actions. So far, the move has been incredibly effective. We've been able to deliver all our revenue targets, all our transaction targets, all our brand equity targets, and importantly, what we measure, which is the equity gaps versus our key competitors across the many dimensions of our brand. So it has been a a very interesting journey, but I have to say a very, very hard journey, because you're altering pretty much every single relationship that you have. Your strategic agency now has to share the stage with your media agency that has to go first. The creative agency now has to share creative authorship with people like Twitter, people like Google, people like Facebook. And as a client, you have to make sure that all this is working together in a way that you're actually able to deliver an integrated brand promise. So my marketers, in addition to doing the hard analytical work, have become true orchestra directors in a much more complex sort of symphony, just because of the number of players that you need in order to deliver a truly compelling proposition. But by the way, there's no going back. I cannot foresee doing our work today without media going first, deep down and dirty into the details of what is the consumer journey, and co-development with partners like Google, partners like Facebook, or partners like Twitter. The NFL program that we did on Super Bowl night was 100% developed by Twitter. Adam Bain and his team came with the idea, and we had to very quickly make a decision, and it ended up being a very, very interesting program from which we learned a lot. So I have to say, I mean, I've never been as excited to be a marketer than I am at this time, with all its challenges and all its opportunities.
And you say you made all of your metrics, your goals over the past few years as you shifted to digital. But how do you measure, how do you connect the two? How do you know that shift to digital is the reason that you made those goals?
Well, some of it is hard, which is you know the changes that you've made in media, and you know the numbers that you have in equity. To make the big leap, you have to put together some of the individual matrix that each one of these disciplines have. So it's not as direct as it was before, but I think we're getting to a place where, because it is working, people are beginning to trust us more when we say, you know what, we're going to do a bit more social here and there, when the matrix are not 100% there to prove it.
Right. Let me ask you, when in the fall of 2008, you wake up and hear that Lehman Brothers is no longer, and you realize that the stuff's really hit the fan, what'd you do?
Wow, that's a very interesting question, because we were about to take the company public in the middle of all this mess. And from a brand standpoint, we were about to relaunch the brand for the first time a global positioning. Visa was a totally decentralized company. It was an association. There was no P&L. There was no overall structure that delivered against very specific targets, and it was completely decentralized. At this time, the company is going to get public. We're going to get into one company with one brand, one positioning statement, one agency network, and the economy hits. Oh, by the way, and we had approved a campaign already to be launched. At that moment, we had to do probably the deepest and most intense research work that we've ever done. And when I say deepest and most intense, it was at multi-stakeholders. At one point in time, because the Obama administration had won but was not yet sitting in power, we had people from the Washington scene, including Leon Panetta, showcasing what we were about to undertake to ensure that the messaging that we were going to do, in addition to resonating with consumers, resonating with our banks, resonating with our merchants, was going to resonate with opinion leaders. I had never done anything like that before. I think it was instrumental in launching the campaign and launching the company. And we were able to like everybody else, survive the storm. And now we're in the US slowly returning to growth. Outside of the United States, we're growing exponentially.
So did you change anything because of the financial crisis, or did you modify any approaches that you were going to take to the market? Did you take to heart any of there was a lot of blame being thrown around. I don't think it was specific to Visa per se, but it was to anyone who issued credit, and particularly in the mortgage-backed area, but generally I think it spread out. Was there anything that the company took on as lessons learned, or was it, these storms come, these storms go?
No, we fundamental change in strategy. Number one, we focus all our marketing support on debit. It's money that you have, and by the way, in our conversations with opinion leaders, they said that was strategically and for the country the most important thing that we could do. So I would tell you that 90% of our message was debit related at the time. We changed the tone of the advertising to ensure that responsible spending was always encouraged. And finally, because we weren't sure as to what the consumption numbers were going to be, we were cautious in media spending, and digital had delivered some tangible proof points in terms of return. That was the beginning of the shift to digital, actually.
Right.
So those were the three fundamental pillars of our strategy.
Great. Well, thank you for that. We have time maybe for one or two questions for Antonio. Please just raise your hand, and we've got a mic runner here, right here.
Hi, my name is Nathan Shore. The company's Net Meals. Perhaps I didn't hear you properly. You had mentioned about 5 minutes ago that there was participation and there was engagement. And if I understood you correctly, you distinguished the two. You distinguished participation.
I said participation is the new form of engagement.
Okay, so they're synonymous. That's
yes.
And the other terms were, can you? Sharing
is the new giving.
Okay.
Participation is the new engagement. And recommendations are the new form of advertising.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions?
Actually, Wired magazine, I need to figure out who actually said this, because the line was amazing. He said that in the future, advertising is going to be like sex. Only the losers will pay for it. Just to prove the point on recommendation. That was your ex-company, right?
Yes, I was a co-founder of Wired. No, I did not say that. Yes, I wish I had. One last question.
It's like the myth that everyone's having good sex except you. The great American myth.
I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
So my question is, do you have a particular focus and campaign in terms of marketing and targeting women, given that women make 80% of buying decisions?
I mean, that's our key target, if you will, and if you take a look at the skew of our communication, it will gear more to the female side. Again, we have subsegments, affluent and cross-border and all that. But it is, I mean, in fact, our numbers will suggest that our communications tends to do better among women than among men. So it's always at the back of our minds as to whether we're a very specific strategy on. No, we don't have that.
And is that a global strategy? And are you getting into the financial services aspect of marketing to women with smartphones and all those devices, and expanding that scope of Visa?
As a general strategy, yes. Depending on the different geographies, we would go one target or the other. Again, in most of the rest of the world, we're still doing very basic education campaigns. In other words, we're developing the debit category in Brazil. What you have to show is that it is easier to pay with your debit card at the point of sale than going to an ATM, get cash, make a line, and then go and get assaulted. So it's very functional in that type of approach outside of the United States. But in the United States, I would say that our campaign tilts a bit more female.
I wish we could continue, but we have to stay on schedule because there is a show tonight. But please join me in thanking Antonio for coming today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.